I was working for companies like Microsoft and Fitbit, but I just didn't feel, alive and connected. So I happened to get into this tech career, which served me really well. And I think in many ways used a lot of the skills that I have, but I'm not sure that it was ever as oriented to my values and who I really am. Once the pain of being a bud is greater than the pain of flowering, we flower. That notion of it becoming almost too much and you have to change, I think is one driver for me.
It's a lovely morning in Philadelphia, and I have a beautiful person here whose work came across to me because I work in a similar field of helping people discover their second act, and meet now Meg, who's helping continents away people with their alter egos, again, with the same intention, helping people to discover a better part of them. So Meg, just to introduce you, you are a person who's working on the alter egos of people. We will talk more about it. And I don't know how did you come to discover this part, that this must be your calling to design, lives of people as they want it to be. Of course, that's the intention for everybody. I wish I could design my life too, the way that wants. So that's why we are working on it every day. And I call it to be in progress or work in progress, I would say. And there is a lot that, during communication has come out of you. And I want to take those questions as we progress, but welcome. And this is a second act podcast. I call it a podcast where people in the second invention of themselves, and it can happen at any time. So it's not about that one thing finishes and the other starts, and that's your second act. It is any new awakening, any learning, any reinvention. It's all different acts that we play, and that's when second act happens. So welcome, and how are you feeling to be on this podcast?
Oh, I'm very excited. Thank you very much for having me. I agree that when I came across your work, I thought, oh yeah, we're swimming in similar waters. We're doing similar things. And being a woman who is in my 40s myself, I've definitely experienced a lot of those feelings around being in your second act. But I'm excited to share with your audience and to share a little bit about my journey and the work that I'm doing, because we need as many tools as we can get as we're reinventing ourselves and figuring out how we really want to be.
Absolutely. So thanks, Meg, for doing what you're doing. But I'm sure that this journey didn't happen the way that you planned it, and you have made it happen. So why don't we start from start? Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you grew up, what did you do in your initial years, and how did you land here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Meg Niman. I am American. I started my life in San Diego, California. My parents continued to have children. So I'm the oldest of 6 kids. My youngest sister is 16 years younger than I am. I drove to the hospital with all the other kids to go see her when she was born. And so I think that, as a kid, growing up in San Diego seemed sort of idyllic. And then at 10 years old, we moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is sort of across the country. It's no longer beaches and sunshine. There's snow and there's rain. And it felt sort of like a time warp. And that, I think, was the first moment that things started to go a little bit astray. I had to learn how to make all new friends. I had to learn this new area. And from there, I think I spent a lot of high school and then even to some degree into college, just sort of doing what seemed like I was supposed to do and what people needed of me. And so I think, especially as being the oldest sibling, we were all, me and my next sister were junior mothers to these younger kids. And when I went to school, I was lucky enough to take every class that I was interested in. I got a cognitive science degree, which is this interdisciplinary degree. So on the one hand, I got to do whatever I wanted. I took some psychology and some linguistics, and I got a degree out of it. But on the other hand, I didn't know what to do with it. Yeah. I was just sort of wayward, and it felt like I was just going to do the next best thing, but it wasn't particularly intentional. You know what I mean? And so I ended up becoming a teacher because I didn't know what to do with my degree. And then I got burned out as a teacher, and I happened to be in Silicon Valley, and I happened to be there at the right time. And so I happened to get into this tech career, which served me really well. And I think in many ways used a lot of the skills that I have, but I'm not sure that it was ever as oriented to my values and who I really am. And so I think that, you know, the first half of my life, despite making a lot of changes and doing some intentional things, was really around kind of doing what was in front of me and almost getting backed into a corner and then having to make a decision, you know, rather than like a forward posture of like, I want to do this. So I would say that, yeah, up until, you know, kind of 38 years old, that was how life was sort of playing out for me. I was making decisions. I was building a business even at one point as a consultant, but it still was kind of the easiest next best thing that seemed like it would kind of work. And then just kind of jumping forward, which maybe is sort of a little bit of your next question, but I felt like I both belonged and didn't belong. I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I was successful. I was working for companies like Microsoft and Fitbit, but I just didn't feel, you know, alive and connected. And then my 12-year relationship fell apart. So that was the moment where, again, it happened to me, but I really had this sort of, I was working with a number of different coaches, and it became more clear that I could start doing what I really wanted to do. And one of those things was actually move back here from California to be closer to my family, because I had this large family that I really love. And so I did that, and I moved back here, and I've been slowly kind of dismantling this next best thing into a much more intentional version of what I want to be. And I had a pivotal moment a little over a year ago, where I was working for a lovely company. I was doing tech work that was, again, not awful. It was fulfilling enough. And I had to get clear with myself. And I can tell you more about this exercise, but I did an exercise, and it was just like night and day. Like, one version of me was like all constricted, like, yeah, I guess I'll stay with this job. And then the other was like, I'm going to do the alter ego project. And so it was really like listening to my heart, listening to my gut, that made me really invest in this newer work. And it fills me up. It is heart-centered. It is based on my own experiences of growth. And it's an impactful practice. And so for that, I'm grateful. And that's how I went from being kind of one foot in front of the other to really taking the reins and trying to live a much more intentional life.
Wow. So what I'm hearing, since you are narrating your whole life in front of me in 5 minutes, what I'm hearing is that you said that I took chances, or this happened to me. So is it that you took chances, or was it a transition of, because it was happening to you, you were taking those chances? Because you also speak a lot about taking choices later.
Yeah. So
what is it? In the beginning, do we now, when we are younger, we just fall into the trap of just whatever's available to us, we do that?
So there's this Anais Nin quote, which I'm going to not say totally correctly, but it's basically this idea that once the pain of being a bud is greater than the pain of flowering, we flower. And that's not exactly how she said it, but that notion of it becoming almost too much and you have to change, I think is one driver for me.
Right.
And so once I have to change, then I do try to figure out what that change is. As I've been getting older and looking back on how I've gone about change, for me, and I think for a lot of other people, it also can work. I really like taking small actions, testing the waters, and then ending up with what I call like a reason to believe. And once I have a reason to believe that something might work, it's much easier to go into it. But I'm not a big fan of just jumping 2 feet in without a safety net or without a practice run, because I think that that's sometimes where things just, I'm both a conservative person, and I'll take the risk once I believe that it can happen. And so that, as I take more and more risks and bigger and live a bigger and bigger life, continues to serve me. Try it, assess, adjust, and then you can continue.
So cool. So cool. So thanks. It brings a lot of questions to me, but I want to start with the first pertinent question. What is alter ego?
Absolutely. So in my definition, an alter ego is any other side of yourself. Okay. So we all do this. We have a different side of ourselves that show up when we go hang out with family, or when we're with our school friends, or when we're at work. And this is normal. So I just want to let people know this is normal. And there's this sense that you have to be this one authentic self. And that's actually often more limiting than just allowing ourselves to be the different sides of ourselves when we're in a different mood, or when we're with, it's energies and they bring out different things. So on the broadest version, an alter ego is just another side of yourself. The twist that I focus on is constructed alter egos. So a lot of times these things just kind of emerge, and there are parts of ourselves that come out. There's something very different when you actually apply a design process and say, what's the problem I'm trying to solve? What's a potential solution? Let me craft that. Let me go wide like a designer and think of all the different ways. Let me narrow it back down and create this character. You end up with like a character sheet. They got a name. They have a way of being. They have clothes that they wear. They become this real thing. And that's kind of what I'm most interested in, is actually taking them from this abstract idea or this thing that pops out and turning them into a real thing that you get to put on and bring to the situation. And then you can take it back off. A very famous example is Sasha Fierce. So Beyonce has this character, Sasha Fierce. I was doing some research, and actually Sasha Fierce is interesting because she actually originated when Beyonce was like 6 years old. Wow. She originated as a way to deal with stage fright. But at some point in Beyonce's career, she also really wanted to step into the fullness of Beyonce, not the former lead singer of Destiny's Child, but this person that we know now. And Sasha Fierce was really pushing into a very large stage presence, pushing into her sexuality, pushing into her empowerment. And then Beyonce famously, after she had that album and went on tour, retired Sasha Fierce. She said, Sasha Fierce is dead. I no longer need her. She's part of me. Oh. And so in some ways, that's the goal. Take this alter ego that you've constructed and make them a part of you. And if you hate them or they don't work for you, get rid of them. This is about experimentation and again, choices. This isn't about a one linear singular path. It's very important to me that we do things in that way, that it's experimentation and we give ourselves the grace to also learn and walk away.
But Meg, tell me, do you come across people who say, I don't even know what the problem is?
Yes. And whenever I work with people, it's really interesting. I have the first exercise we do is I have you imagine that you are on a stage. The stage of whatever, the stage of work, the stage of life. It's a place that's, you know that things aren't quite right. So people do generally know that like something's not quite right. Yeah. As soon as you ask them, there's a place that they're stuck. There's a place that they're confused. And then once you imagine yourself on the stage, what are you doing? Are you wearing a polyester costume that feels itchy and gross? Are you running around between the front of the stage and the back of the stage and you can't decide where you want to be? Are you off in the wings, too afraid to walk onto stage? Are you falling down on the stage? Are you sitting in the audience, not even on the stage? Or maybe you're in the audience because you're a director, but there's no actors yet. And when I lay it out like that, people get an image. And it doesn't have to be any of the things that I mentioned, but usually that helps people to realize, oh yeah, these are the ways that I'm behaving, or these are the things that are coming up in me, or these are the feelings
Wow. Right.
that I want to fix.
Wow. So how did you come to this conclusion that this is the topic you want to work on?
Yeah. It was sort of the big story, the big origin story is I'd been kind of introduced to this idea of different selves. And I mentioned I'd gone through the separation and then eventually a divorce. I moved to Pennsylvania to be closer to my family, but I literally never lived in Philadelphia before. And so I was this person who was very unmoored. I was also on a self-funded sabbatical, so I didn't even have a job. You know, I was doing artistic pursuits and really just trying to like heal myself and figure out what was going on. And it was before COVID. And I started going out to different social events and realized I can be whoever I want. And I don't know if this happens. People will sometimes like go to a bar and just give a fake name and just pretend to be somebody else. And I'm a very honest person, but I tried it. And I was shocked because this person named Dee showed up. And Dee, unlike me, who is a people pleaser and a junior mother and very much wanting to help other people first, Dee was very clear about what she wanted. She wanted this drink. She did not want that drink. She wanted to talk to this person. She did not want to talk to this person. Wow. She answered honestly, and she didn't care if the other person liked the answer or not. She was very much like, take it or leave it. Take me or leave me. So the interesting part was not just that Dee came out of me and I wasn't fully expecting her, but then I started workshopping her, you know, because I'm a designer by trade. And this is what we do is you take an idea and you figure it out. The most interesting part was I was then needing to spin up a consulting business. And I had the insight that I could bring Dee to the contract negotiation. And that, when I showed up and I was like, yeah, maybe I can help you.
To me.
I don't know. And so we ended up with this trial for 2 months and they were a client for 2.5 years. And that was the insight that not only do these different sides of yourselves help, but when you consciously create them and bring them to the appropriate situation, they can really change the outcome.
So is this also being your authentic self, or is it just playing a role?
Yeah, great question. So I believe it's your authentic self because you created it. So the whole exercise is what speaks to you. And I'm sure you've heard this idea that like we notice in others what we have in ourselves. And so by constructing it yourself, you know, you might be a huge fan, you might be a huge fan of one actor, and I'm a huge fan of another actor. There's a reason we like these different actors. They speak to something in ourselves. Or we could be fans of the same actor, but when we actually try to deconstruct them, I see different things than you do. So because you make it yourself, I'm not giving it to you. You are choosing all the components.
Yeah.
I really think it is an authentic version of you, and you can always throw it away. So if you put it on and you go order a coffee or go out to dinner as this person and realize that it feels like you're crawling out of your skin and you hate it, get rid of it and start over or tweak it. That is what allows it to continue to be authentic, is that you are taking little risks with it, but you're also always at choice.
So when do you know it's the right time to switch off and switch on? How do you know?
In general, I'd say that, you know, as you're starting to workshop one of these characters and build it out, it's going to feel a little unnatural. That doesn't mean that it's not authentic. It's just going to feel new. And it can be hard to kind of keep up that persona forever. And so I think in the beginning, especially, it's really good to bring it to situations where you know they're useful, and then allow yourself to just kind of not have to bring that person. The thing that I also have found with people, so I'm sure you've had this happen. You go into a conversation, you're all prepared, you have your notes, you're trying to advocate for whatever you need to, and the other person says something, and you get this zing, right? You're like, oh, it sort of pierces your heart. And then all of a sudden your brain goes away. You don't know what's going on. you either are now yelling or you've turned totally quiet, like you've lost control of the situation, right? We've all been there.
Yes.
If you have an alter ego, one, they usually don't get zinged in the same way because it's not quite as personal. It's a little bit away from you. And so that can help you sort of manage that conversation. And just the same way that you go into that conversation with resolve and then you walk away and you don't have to be that thing anymore. Same thing with the alter ego. You walk out of the conversation, hopefully you've gotten what you want, and then you get to just go celebrate. So if it becomes something that Dee is becoming more and more part of me. She'll show up in lots of other places. She also forgets to show up, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I have this ring that I wear, which is my D ring. And so when I want to be my biggest, fullest self, I put those on. I put it on for networking events. I put it on for talking with other people about alter egos because it helps me. Wow. And then I take it off.
Mm-hmm. People talk a lot about inner child. We become the people because of everything that happens during our childhood. So does this play a role?
It does. I mean, I am not a psychologist. I'm not a psychotherapist. I am a heavy consumer of psychotherapy. And I both studied some psychology in undergraduate, and my former partner is a psychiatric nurse practitioner. So I have adjacent knowledge, but I am not an expert. So I speak about this more as just a person in the world. I think that you can think of an inner child as an alter ego. I really do believe that there are things that happen to us when we're young that continue to color and influence. And at the same time, the whole kind of thesis of therapy or other versions of self-growth, which I've also dabbled in, whether it be, meditation or a number of different areas. I think there is an underpinning of optimism and of change.
Right.
We can grow and we can heal our inner children, or at least recognize them and try to reparent them. Yes, we have inner children, but it doesn't mean that they have to rule our lives. That's sort of the problem, is when they're ignored and not able to be as seen. And so I think that if it's useful to you, sure, you can use this alter ego frame to sort of help you understand. And that's one of the other benefits that people often find in coming to speak with me or just learn about this, is just the notion that you have different sides of yourself. People usually are like, oh, right. Oh, yeah. I do have this person. So the concept alone is just helpful.
Right.
But, I think that if you're really struggling with a lot of issues where you know that it's related to your inner child, I think seeking out therapy and other forms to really heal that and take attention to it is great. I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention this work is adjacent to a man named Dr. Richard Schwartz. He does work on internal family systems. That's his kind of brainchild. And he talks about parts, which are very similar to alter egos, and very much one of the pieces is essentially an innocent, an exile is what he calls it, but it's usually a child who's sort of stuck in time and hasn't really been given the love and attention and care that they need to feel safe. Yeah. And so it is all kind of connected. I am very non-dogmatic. So whatever is going to help you to be the biggest, best version of yourself, even if that means that you are a monk in silence, if that's the biggest, best version of yourself, that's fine. I think we need as many tools as possible. And, this is one of many, and I am a consumer of many tools. So I think that it's really individual as to what you need to do, but I'm doing a ton of inner child work right now. Again, as somebody in my 40s, I think that I'm finally ready to kind of look at that, and I can better recognize how so much of that energy was what was holding me back. And I'm an adult. I don't need to do that anymore,
Very nice. Thank you for sharing that, really. Okay, so tell me, how many alter egos can one person have?
As many as you want. Truly.
Give me some
So
examples.
I'll give you another example. I was watching this documentary about Serena Williams. Serena Williams, in the span of like 2 minutes, rattled off 5 different alter egos. She has Summer, who she uses to get things done. She's her personal assistant. She, over time, has given her a British accent. She has Megan, who is the girl from the hood, who it lets her be not under the spotlight, Serena, but just, there's a scene where she's literally playing volleyball and she knocks somebody in the face and she laughs about it. She's like, oh, that was Megan. She has Taquanda. Taquanda yelled at the line judge and got her fined $10,000. She tries to keep her under wraps. She had another one who was unnamed, who was about fashion, and I'm forgetting who the last one was, but none of them were Serena, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot. I personally have 6 or 7 that I found along the way. The 2 that I really play the most with are Dee, who I mentioned, who is this kind of, she's take it or leave it. And then I've also, and this is actually potentially helpful for folks, another way that people use this is almost like going into specific modes. So Sahil Bloom is a kind of influencer about productivity that you'll find on the internet. And he has like meditation mode on his phone. He's like, I'm like deep, I'm sort of getting centered. Then he has deep work mode. And then he has like best father and husband of the year mode. And so, those are also alter egos in my book. Those are different things that he's doing. And so for me, I've got Dee, and then I also have invented Chloe, and she's about 26. She's much more in tune with social media and with promotion than I am. I get in my way all the time. So I put her on, and she can go write my LinkedIn posts. She can go out there and do things and advocate in a way that I can't. So yeah, very much inventing them, especially if you're an entrepreneur or wearing a lot of different hats, having your sales persona and having your, like deep thinking persona. And then those things can help.
So now I'm also relating it to my own life now. Thank you for bringing this perspective. I've never thought, to be honest, because I also do the podcast. I also do social work. I also take workshops. I do these kind of retreats as well with women. So like, I'm just thinking, okay, and of course, a person at home, a mother, everything. So how many hats am I wearing? How many alter egos do I have?
Yeah. And especially to bring your best self, right? Because the person who's the podcast person is probably not the best version to bring when you're at home trying to connect with your family.
That's true.
So just even acknowledging it allows you a little bit of the freedom to say, oh yeah, I don't need to wear that hat anymore.
Yes. Yeah. So nice. I mean, thank you. But what about somebody like me who didn't know anything about it? I don't know how to manage it. I don't know what it is. But I'm sure there are tips to identify different personalities. Do you have something like that to tell?
Yeah, sure. I think that, the first thing that I believe is helpful is noticing. So if you don't already have some version of a mindfulness practice, or sort of being able to do that dualism of living and also sort of thinking about living.
Right.
That's the first place that I like to start, because I think it's a skill for all of us, right? And there's so many different ways that you can do that. But even just, you sit down to write an email. How are you feeling? What's going on? You continue to write that email. How does that, change things? You're washing the dishes. What are you actually feeling in your body? Just very simple mindfulness things are a really good start, because then you can start to create that distance and say like, oh yeah, what is really going on here? You get zinged and you're like, oh, even if it's 10 minutes later and the meeting's passed, you can have that moment of reflection to say, wait, what just happened there?
Yeah.
Oh, a different side of myself came out. So that's sort of the first. The next would be to really try to find those places where you are stuck. Where stuck in so many different ways too. I mean, I am a victim of this, where you just try the same thing over and over and over again, or you try lots of different things and none of them seem to work, you know? And so you're like, wait, but I tried this and I tried this and I'm still in the same place. These are those moments where you really kind of need something else.
Yeah.
And we do things like asking a friend for advice. What if you could bring somebody else? So another really great question that I like to ask is two actually. One is, what would so-and-so do? So what would blank do, right? So, you're in this difficult situation. I decided to switch from being a designer to being a product manager. And when I first was doing that, I kept thinking, what would Ryan do? He was the best product manager I knew. And just thinking of what he would do helped me, right?
Wow.
So he was my alter ego. And then the other one is sort of like, if only I had. And often filling in that blank can also help you to realize what you really need. If only I had more time. Okay, then how are you going to put up some boundaries to do that?
Right. Yeah. So cool. That's a nice one. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard, Meg, of this very beautiful quotation saying, your mind is the easiest to work on and it's the most difficult to work on? And
No.
Okay. So yeah. So I love this quotation because the mindset is such a thing that in one split of a second it can change because you've thought of it to be in a happy mode, or you want to think positive. And the same mindset can really bring you down because you're thinking everything negative. And this switchover happens. And I think that's what you're also working on with your work. Now, how do you change your mindset? So
Yeah.
what are the steps that you take to help people to think in a different way than they are already thinking?
Yeah.
Perceive things in a different way, I would say.
Yeah. I'm actually going to start by saying that I don't want to discount actual mental health issues. So as somebody who has had my own and have had times when I've been on medication and when I haven't, there's something really amazing where your thoughts almost aren't your own, and it is it can be very hard to get out of that. So I just want to acknowledge that on the one hand, yes, we have a ton of choice and we have a ton that we can work with. And if it's feeling untenable or you're getting feedback that this is too much, please do seek out professional help, because I've experienced it myself where I'm trying to break out of something and it's just so very, very, very hard. And once I get some more help, the thoughts do become easier. So I just want to say that, because I would be remiss if I didn't. At the same time, if you're in a generally stable enough place and the thoughts are generally under your control, I think that the tuning into the body becomes a really huge way to do that. And so, doing a version of mindful breathing, even just taking deep breaths, can help. I also, when I'm really stuck in a loop, when you're really having those tormenting thoughts that are just, you can't seem to get out of, changing the environment is a huge bit for me. So I'm a big hiker. I like going for walks.
Nice.
Versions of exercise, or even cook a meal, just change. And some people will change and then get stuck in the change and never come back. So if you have to keep yourself honest, set a timer, let yourself do something else for 20 minutes or an hour and then come back. But that switching out of the mode and then coming back to it often really helps. Some other things that I do, take a shower, take a bath. We have those ideas of shower thoughts, sometimes it's like you need to let yourself relax. I also play music. And so I'll find myself sometimes just playing a 3 or 4 minute piece on the piano. And that is enough.
Right.
Or go sit outside and feel the sun on your body and the breeze on your face, and watch an insect or a bird and allow that to captivate your attention for a little while.
Yeah, so right. Thank you for these tips. I'm curious about who is your audience? What is the kind of group that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had the good fortune of working with a lot of different people, but the people that seem to come back to me over and over again is you and I. It's women, or at least not men. I'm happy. I myself identify as queer. So, if you're within that group, that is fantastic. It's a lot of people who have been marginalized in some way. So I definitely have a US centric view. I have not been fortunate enough to live anywhere other than the US. So that's my lens. But at least here, if your skin looks like me, if you're a white person, you have a lot of privilege. And at the same time, I'm a woman, so I have somewhat less privilege. There's all those sort of ideas of where we sit in society. But if you've had society put you in a box because of your skin color, because of your gender, because of your social status, because of your economics, when you've been marginalized in that way and sort of pushed, and not that people who have privilege don't also get pushed into boxes, but I think the way that when the world tells you who you're supposed to be, and it doesn't fit, because it rarely does, those folks tend to really appreciate this work because it is a way to take a little bit more control, but it's also very feminine and very free and very creative. It's not trying to be any one thing. It's really giving yourself the permission to take control and to be the empowered version of you that you want to be, not what other people have been telling you to be. So it's a lot of women in their mid-career, midlife, who are just kind of saying like, is this it? Is this what I want? How can I make this more of what I really want? They like this stuff.
I can speak from my personal life because I think this transition also happened to me during my late 40s. I had thought that, what is it that life is? Who am I? What is it that I'm doing in this life? What am I really believing in? What are my values? I mean, really, till that time, it was always doing something for fulfilling somebody else's responsibilities and duties and everything, making this little life that I have beautiful. At least I thought so. But then it came to all about me. And I was like, who am I? What am I doing? But what about me? So is it a selfish transition that you see? I mean, I'm asking myself this question. And why does it start so late in life? And why doesn't it happen before? And even because I do a lot of retreats, a lot of workshops, and mostly women who come for these are in their early 40s to 55.
Yeah. Here are my theories.
Yes.
I went to a women's college as well, and I was lucky enough to we had like a little informal reunion. So I was in this group of 35 women who had all, it was a competitive school, so everybody was pretty driven. And I think that one part is that the roadmap, like the map ends. You've had this whole life of things that you're supposed to do or things that you've sort of planned, and you've gotten all of it. And you're not elated. You're not fully satisfied. You're not complete. And it's this question of like, I did all the things. Is this it? Now what? So I think that's one version, is by the time that you get to 40, you've ticked the boxes. You've had the children or you haven't had the children. You've tried relationships or not. You've done what you want in your career. Not that everybody's as linear, but you've done a lot of the things, and you're sort of left like, that's one. Another is this idea that Anais Nin was positing, which is like, we've been told to do things so much and other people rely on us, and there's this notion that women are just going to take care of things, and we've been rewarded for that. And we're just depleted. We're done. there's just no energy left in the tank. And some very deep part of ourselves says, right, you haven't paid any attention to me. And it comes out and says, I need attention. I don't believe it's selfish. I don't believe it's selfish because we are people. Every person, I think, has a right and a duty in many ways to be as whole as possible. I also think that, at least, again, I speak mostly from a American-centric view because that's just what I know. I see a lot of people who, my parents wanted to do better than their parents. That was the billboard. Their parents wanted them to do better than they did. They wanted to do better than their parents. I think a lot of people our age want to be emotionally healthier than our parents. I don't think it's as much about, for some of us at least, and people who like this kind of work, it's not that I want to have more money and more. It's that I want to be more whole and more of who I truly am. And that's a very different shift of attention and energy. And I think that, again, there's sort of this, I've been doing this on somebody, there's this woman, a folk singer, that I love this part of her song. I say it all the time, but there's a song called The Way I Should. And she says, I realized that I was trying to keep my score up in a game I didn't choose.
No.
How many of us are doing that? And finally, we're sick of losing. We're sick of having a great score and not feeling good. And I think there really is something around, you've been doing it for so long. And then the last thing is, I think, probably the mortality of, Other thing that I like to say is, by the time that you're in your 40s, life has lived you in some way. Whether that's that you've, dealt with the trials and tribulations of parenthood, whether that's because you've had a relationship that came and went, whether that's because you dealt with cancer or some other major disease, whether that's because you lost a partner or a parent. It's basically impossible to get to this age and not have some sort of life event happen to you. Sure. And I think also, having life live you makes you question what you're doing.
Yeah, very well put. And I think I'm living it anyway. So I just wanted another point of view. Am I on the right track or not? Because I work so much with women as well. And this is more and more that we see, that we feel liberated, and we want to feel liberated after a while, to say, okay, I've had enough of life leading me. Now I want to lead my life. Right.
Yeah. And I think one other thing that I meant to say is, oftentimes when you step out of the way and you actually pay attention to yourself, other people are given the space to step up and live their lives too. And so that's the other way that it's not selfish. In taking care of yourself, you actually are calling everyone else to do the same. And I think that as we grow, that's what each of us needs, is to be self-sufficient and to really know what we want and to take care of ourselves as individual people.
So good. Great. So thank you for that. Of course, this podcast is about second act. And this question I have to ask you, what does second act bring to you? And if I say, what's your second act, what is that?
The Alter Ego Project, for sure. For sure. It is a culmination of all the parts of my life that came before. It's my lived experience. It's part of the teacher that I always have wanted to be. It's the 17 years of product design and design thinking, but it is my own amalgamation, and it is very much my own path. And it's something that I think, which may or may not be true for everybody, but for me, if I'm truly honest, this is what I've wanted to do for a long time. I've wanted to be able to talk to people and help them, and I finally had the courage to do it.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing that too. I was talking to my 22-year-old daughter today, and I was telling her that you will be on my podcast. And if there is one question from a young woman point of view she would like to ask, what would that be? And she said to ask you that she saw in your profile that you love nature and that you love spending time, like creating your own life now. So she said, if somebody is attracted like that, how does one earn money?
Mm-hmm.
So she says, what do you have to say how to get finances moving?
It's a great question. And I think there's a lot of value in avocations and things that don't earn you money, but bring you joy.
Mm.
So if you're truly, truly passionate about nature, there are fields of ecology, there are fields of conservation, there are ways that you can make that your work. But for me, I use it as fodder for how I can grow as a person. And I use it as medicine to get centered. I use knitting in the same way. I knit. I don't knit any, I don't care what I knit. I just knit for the meditative practice. So, in the same way, how do you earn money from meditation? Very few people do. And that's fine because it's a helpful practice. So I think that, there's a little bit of this flaw that you have to make money off the thing that you're most passionate about, especially when you're young. I think what you need to do is try stuff and get your feet under you. And it's okay if it's not absolutely perfect. You're going to learn and figure out what is. And there are plenty of people that make their love their profession and then get burned out from it or wonder what else could have been. So one last thing that I'll say to her is, I don't remember which famous person this was, but it was, let's say it was Shaquille O'Neal.
Okay.
Shaquille O'Neal is this famous basketball player. He spent his whole life as a basketball player. Even these people that are so successful and they're amazing, or Michael Jordan, right? They're amazing at their craft. They question what else they could have done. What else could have been?
Yes.
Maybe Shaquille O'Neal could have been a brilliant economist. Maybe he could have been an amazing teacher. And so it's like, even these people that have had this single-minded career that have had the most success, they're still not sure that they did the right thing or that there wasn't another path for them. So I think when you're young, there's so much pressure to just like get on it and do it and stay focused. I mean, not to burst your bubble, but I don't know if social media influencers are going to be a successful career in 20 years. Right. Like we all have to figure out how to make it work in today and what that means for tomorrow. And so as a young person, I care much less about whether this is the perfect career for you. And I care much more about what you're learning and what you're figuring out about yourself. And you try it. And if you don't like it, then switch, but at least get the information. You're not going to think your way into money, and you're not going to think your way into knowing what your ideal life is. And if anything, take solace in the fact that we at 40 still don't really know. So it's life, but that's what I would say to her is if you're really interested, there's a way. And if not, just enjoy it and allow it to be a hobby.
Yeah, so true. So thank you. I'm sure that she loved hearing this answer of yours. Okay, so we want to wrap up, but we have the last few rapid fire questions, as we call them. So try to be as crisp as possible. So if I ask you, how can you make this world still a better place? What would you say?
Compassion.
Yeah.
For yourself and others.
Nice. Which goodbye will be the hardest for you to say?
Oh, that's not fair. To the world, like to the sun, to the sunsets.
So beautiful. What do you not have that you really, really wanted?
A deep, loving relationship with a partner.
What do you want people to discover you long after you're gone?
I would love people to see me as an example and an inspiration.
Okay. How can someone make you feel more loved?
Attention is the biggest gift, I think. Attention and care.
And the last thing that you want us to hear before you go away right now.
We all have potential and we all deserve love.
So beautiful. So thanks, Meg, for happening to me. Thanks, Nivedita, for making Meg happen into my life, because this is a beautiful podcast. And I'm sure that we will keep talking, and thanks to our work, we will keep touching people's lives so that this world become a little bit more happy, a little bit more joyous, and women are able to identify their own needs and, of course, become more self-compassionate. So
thank you very much for having me.
So this is yet another incredible episode of Discover Your Second Act. I'm hoping that, as me, you are feeling very, very excited, enthusiastic, and learned about all the nuggets that came out. So follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and of course, until next time, keep discovering your second act.